Um, my name is Lucinda, and I'm very happy to be here today doing the first of our deep dive sessions into a specific part of home energy efficiency, and that is hot water heat pumps. It's, for some reason, it's one of the most uh, um, requested topics we get, I should say. And even when I do home energy efficiency assessments, it's one of the most common things people get confused by and ask for explanations about. So I hope that you'll find it interesting. Just as a coincidence, this morning we got a hot water heat pump flyer in our letterbox offering a nice cheap hot water heat pump. I'm not sure if that went out to the whole community, but if it did, it's possible that there'll be a whole bunch of people wondering, what's it about? Should I go for it? Is it too good to be true? That sort of thing. So that's what we're hoping to cover for you today. Before I begin, though, I also would like to pay my deepest respects to the Wurundjeri, who are the traditional owners of the land that I'm on in Nillumbik. I've been thinking a lot about the way that they lived here for so many thousands and thousands of years with a really good balance between their own needs and the needs of the land and the water and the animals. And I guess to me, that's what I love about sustainability and all of these topics that I'm fortunate to learn about and share with other people is that hope that we can become a little bit more balanced ourselves. And home energy efficiency is really about that. It's about trying to figure out how we can make our situation better with less resources. So, just thank you to the Indigenous elders past and present for looking after the land so beautifully so that we can enjoy it now. Now, the Rethink Nillumbik project and Power Up Nillumbik, they are both part of how Council is helping residents take climate action. So the Council declared a climate emergency and developed a 10-year plan. I think we're into about year 3 or just about into year 4. And part of that is that they have contracted us to develop a bunch of workshops. And the aim of the workshop is to help people rethink their relationship with the environment, their choices, their energy use and their houses, and hopefully get a lot of benefits from that. Today we'll be looking at heat pump hot water systems, why they are so energy efficient, a range of things that you might be looking at when you're comparing, because there really are huge amounts of differences between them. Not only cost, but that's one of the big ones. There's other differences as well. I'm also going to explain the rebates and who can give you the rebate and why some systems seem so cheap and others aren't. Just generally what makes them often a really good choice, and then some resources to help you going on from there. So I do hope you enjoy learning about them. I've got the chat function open, so if you do have a burning question, feel free to write it in the chat function. If you think it can wait till the end, we'll have time for questions at the end as well, and it's possible I might cover it. So, but if it's specifically about the slide I'm on, feel free to ask a clarifying question. So first of all, what is a heat pump? And a heat pump is more than just a heat pump hot water system. It's an entire kind of technology. And what it is, if you think of traditional ways to generate heat energy, it was always through, say, burning wood or burning gas or directly using electricity to heat up an element to heat water, for example, or the air. So it was all directly using energy to create heat energy. And that's a very intensive process, an energy intensive process. So heat pump technology was developed to enable us to, instead of create heat, we are able to collect free heat from the atmosphere and then move it to where we want it. And the way it does this is by using fans and refrigerant gas in the condenser units outside the condenser unit. So the way it does this is by taking advantage of 3 natural processes. One that's super important in all aspects of home energy efficiency and not just heat pumps is that heat always tries to move from where it is warmer to where it is less warm. an example of that that's not related to heat pumps is if it's winter and you've got a nice warm room and you're sitting next to a window that's not covered, it will feel like there's cold coming into the room, but it's actually that you're losing warmth from your body and the room. So the heat is always moving, not the cold. With a heat pump, what this means is when heat moves from where it's warmer to less warm, it means that by controlling the refrigerant gas, by expanding it or compressing it on demand, that gas can either draw in heat or expel heat. So, for example, you could draw it in from outside, move it to inside, and then expel it inside where it gets blown around by our air conditioner. Same with hot water, it gets drawn in from outside and put into the water to heat it. It is a little bit of a strange concept that you can create more heat energy than the electrical energy you're using, but it's not right to say you're creating it, you're just collecting it and moving it. So the result is more. I think I've just described quite a bit of this. So heat pumps will use the refrigerant gas compressed or expanded, and then they blow a fan through that, which allows that refrigerant gas to absorb or expel heat. In the case of the hot water system, it's absorbing heat. And we already have a bunch of heat pumps in our homes. We have fridges and freezers, which are heat pumps, but they absorb heat from inside the fridge and expel it outside. We have reverse cycle air conditioners, which are also heat pumps. And then we have hot water heat pumps. The terminology is a bit confusing because if you're in New Zealand, for example, and you say a heat pump, you're actually talking about a reverse cycle air conditioner. That's what they call them. Whereas here, if you say a heat pump, 99% of people are going to think you're talking about a hot water system. So just be aware of that, and that all of these things are actually heat pump technology. So a heat pump hot water system, this is just another visual of what I've explained. If we start on the right, a resistive electric hot water system draws a kilowatt of electrical energy in, and it gives you a kilowatt of hot water heat energy out. Whereas the picture on the left is the heat pump. It uses that kilowatt of electrical energy to compress and expand gas and blow air. And by doing that, it pulls in 3 kilowatts of heat energy and uses that for the water. So that's roughly how it is efficient. Now, if we look at the comparison of annual hot water heating costs, this is a chart from Sustainability Victoria that has been fairly recently updated, so it's reasonably accurate. And you can see that the two most efficient ways, cost efficient, that is, this is costs to run over the space of a year, the two most efficient options are heat pumps or solar hot water systems with a gas boost. So if you have a solar hot water system with a gas boost, it's actually a really efficient system, and there's not necessarily a reason to change it unless you are trying to get off gas, which quite a lot of people are. But if you've got one, you just know that it is efficient, so maybe that changeover might be bumped a little bit down your list of electrification jobs. The reason that we're talking about heat pumps and not solar hot water systems with a gas boost is purely because it's a gas boost, and really we are all trying, well, most people are trying to get off gas just because it's not renewable, whereas heat pumps can be, they're very efficient, but also if you have a solar hot water, a solar rooftop solar panels, you can time your heat pump to heat with those panels. So that's an added bonus money-wise. And also they have timers. That was the other thing I forgot to say. So you can time them to heat when you want them to. So there's a bunch of things to consider when you're looking at a heat pump hot water system. The most obvious one is the configuration. So there's one called a split system. You might notice that's the same name as we sometimes call reverse cycle air conditioners. And really all that means is it's a system that's split into two parts, which is the case for this heat pump hot water and the heat pump reverse cycle air conditioner. In this case, there's a tank, that's the bit on the right, and then there's the condenser unit, which is separate. The picture on the right has the same components, but they're all joined into one, and it's called integrated. So in that case, that little black box at the top contains the condenser unit. So it contains a fan and refrigerant in coils. As for differences, look, there's some small differences in efficiency and noise and cost. Probably the only really significant one that I could think of is where you're going to put it. So if you're swapping out say a gas storage hot water system tank, you might want to put in an integrated one because it's in the exact same spot using the same amount of space, roughly. If you happen to have a hot water system that's, say, inside a cupboard inside your house, which isn't that common, but it does happen, you might want to have a split system so that you can have the tank inside the house connected to the condenser outside the house. In all cases, the condenser has to be outside the house. So, yeah. Any questions you can ask about this? Oh, Shiva said, could we get copies of the slides? Yes, absolutely. I'll be sending copies out, and it's also being recorded. So you've going to have lots of resources. Noise level is a big one, and part of that is because since getting a nice rebate on these units, which is wonderful, we unfortunately had the usual scenario where a bunch of low quality systems got brought out, which were actually quite noisy. And so sometimes, in fact, quite often I get the comment, but if I get a heat pump, is it going to be really noisy? And the answer is no. There's different noise levels with different heat pumps. And what you need to do is check what that noise level is. It's true to say that the most expensive of the heat pumps, what I call the sort of premium range, are the quietest. So if you live in a block of units and your heat pump's going to be going somewhere near your bedroom or near a neighbour's bedroom, something like that, you might decide it's worthwhile getting one with the lowest possible noise level, just so you're not bothering people. But it would be probably similar to an air conditioner because it's the same kind of unit. So if you've heard one of those, although they can differ quite a bit as well, look for the decibel rating. Some people are more sensitive to noise as well and would be bothered by a noisy one. The other consideration is whether you'll be running it during the day or night. And by running it, I mean, when will you be running the condenser, which is heating the water? If you're putting your timer on so that it heats in the middle of the day while you're generating solar electricity, probably the noise isn't going to matter. You might not even be at home, or your neighbours might not be at home. Whereas if it's in the middle of the night, that might be, more of a problem. Whether your unit has a timer panel or a Wi-Fi connection. Now, to me, the timer panel is really important, especially if you have rooftop solar, because if you do have rooftop solar, you probably know that we don't get paid much for any energy we put into the grid. So if you can time your heat pump to heat while you're generating energy, then it's free power for you. And so that's a good reason to have a timer. The Wi-Fi connection is another way to use a timer. It's a little bit more fancy. As long as you have a timer you can set on the pump, that's good. But some people really would like a Wi-Fi connection too. The comparative efficiency is actually quite a tricky one to compare because with most large electrical appliances, the government has mandated that they have to have star ratings, and star ratings are all measured in similar situations. So if you get a 3 kilowatt reverse cycle air conditioner that is 3-star, it will have the same efficiency as another brand of reverse cycle air conditioner that's the same size and the same star rating. Whereas heat pump hot water systems don't have star ratings. So what can we do then to figure this out? Some people look at what's called the coefficient of performance. And this is a measure used for heat pump technology to show how much of your desired energy do you get out for the electrical energy you put in. Most heat pumps will be at least a coefficient of performance of 3, which means for 1 unit of electrical energy, they give 3 of heat energy. But some are higher, the more expensive ones generally. The problem is this coefficient of performance is self-declared. So you can imagine that different companies are going to measure them in different outside temperatures and in different scenarios, which means that they're a little bit hard to trust that they're the same. Well, they're probably not the same, but it gives you a rough idea. Possibly a better way is to see how many STCs are awarded, and STCs are federal government rebate certificates, and they are measured in standard test conditions. They award a certain amount of these per model and unit, like per heat pump, and they would be, so if it technically the more STCs it gets, the more energy it is saving, the more emissions, and the more efficient it is. So yeah, I've written there, it's based on calculated avoided energy use, which is sort of a roundabout, backwards way of looking at it. But look, another thing that's really important, and possibly even more important, is how your heat pump is installed is potentially way more important than the COP or the STCs. Because if you install it in a bad location or you don't install it properly, it doesn't get enough airflow, then that's going to affect its performance a lot more significantly than its innate efficiency. For example, I've put that picture on the right there just as an example. It came up on a Facebook page that I follow sometimes, which looks at energy efficiency things. And technically, this unit is okay because the condenser, really a heat pump has to have lots and lots of airflow around it because it needs the most access to air. Technically, this one is okay, maybe because the airflow is pointing upwards, but you can see that it's really quite cramped. It's still not ideal. And so look, I'm not saying it's wrong because maybe this particular type is okay, but it's definitely something you want to consider if you're getting someone to quote putting one in for you. It needs to have lots of airflow to make it efficient. All right, refrigerant gas. You've probably all heard of the potential negative impacts of refrigerant gas. They all have what's called a global warming potential if they're released into the environment. And until recently, we had quite a lot of refrigerants in use that were fairly damaging. But this has actually already been solved for you to a degree because even, I think it's half a year ago, a lot of heat pump units, the cheaper ones, were using R134A refrigerant, which has a global warming potential of 1,430. But then about half a year ago, it was decided that units that are eligible under the Victorian Energy Upgrades program, the rebate program, have to have a global warming potential of less than 750, which means that we are now only using R744, which is CO2, and R290, which is propane, which is really excellent. Pretty much any unit you get and get a rebate for will have that good or better refrigerant. The size of the tank. The reason it's important that you are aware of this is because you do want to make sure you have enough hot water for your household to not run out. And in the earlier days of the rebate program, there were companies that only sold, say, a 200 litre or a 250 litre system, and they would try and convince people with a 6-adult house that that was perfectly adequate for their home, but it's not. They only said that because it was the only tank they had. So what you need to do is have an idea yourself how much water you might need, and then hopefully if you go with a good quality installer, they can also advise you depending on your scenario. One thing to remember though is that your shower head is actually critically important. And I'll give an example of this. I did an assessment at a house and the person said, look, we're about to replace our hot water system. It's obviously faulty because after we've just had one shower, we run out of hot water and, you know, it's broken. So I measured their shower flow and I looked at the tank. The shower flow was 26 litres a minute. They had 10-minute showers and their tank was a 260 litre tank. So all that was happening was that their shower head was using all of the water in 10 minutes and the tank was empty. There was nothing wrong with the tank. So do keep that in mind, and getting a Wells 3-star shower head is a fantastic idea. It means you won't run out of water so quickly. But if you do, a heat pump can reheat water just like any other hot water system. The only thing is if you've timed it to only heat within specific hours, you might need to change that to get it to reheat. So if say if it's Christmas and you've got all the family over, you might need to turn that timing off so it can reheat in between. The warranty. This is another one. Until the 1st of February this year, there was no warranty requirement for tanks installed under the Victorian Energy Upgrades program, but from the 1st of February, they've said that each tank has to have a 5-year warranty against defects. And in addition, the installer must supply Australian contact details for warranty issues, because the older systems were being put in with sometimes a 1-year warranty. And if you tried to get service, they were overseas, so it was impossible to get help. If you do happen to be in a situation where you've had a heat pump installed prior to this and say it's only got a 1-year warranty, if you did use the $1,000 Solar Vic rebate for your heat pump, I only found this out recently, but that meant that system was required to have a 5-year warranty, even before this change. So I think that's brilliant. And it gives you something to fall back on if you are in that situation. But for anyone who's going to get a heat pump now, you should be pretty set because the warranties are okay now. Of course, if you pay more, you'll get a longer warranty for different components. So, but 5 years basic is at least a good start. Okay, cost and rebates. There are a few rebates you get off your heat pump or water system. The first is the federal government rebate, otherwise known as STC, Small Scale Technology Certificates, Small Scale Renewable Technology Certificates, so that you get the same rebates off rooftop solar. There is also a VEEC rebate, that's the Victorian State Government rebate, and that differs depending on what appliance you're taking out and what you put in. So if you're taking out a resistive electric hot water system, you're going to get a higher amount of VEEC rebate than if you're taking out a gas system, for example. And then on top of that, there's the Solar Vic rebate of an additional $1,000. Now, when the Solar Vic rebate first came out, you could choose between 3 things: a battery storage, rooftop solar, or the heat pump rebate. And you could only do one of those 3. But then after a while, they actually changed it. So you can either get battery storage or you can get both the heat pump and the rooftop panels. So if you got the rooftop panel rebate a couple of years ago, you can now automatically get that additional $1,000 for a heat pump, which is brilliant. Rebates do depend on where you're located, but if you're in Melbourne, the rebates will be the same, so that's not really relevant. And the other thing is who installs your system. We'll talk a little bit more about this. So one of the things that most confuses people, and I totally understand why, and even as a professional energy assessor, it confused me for a very long time, which is why I created this chart, because I ended up explaining it so many times, I thought I've got to put this down somewhere visually. This is the Victorian Government rebate, also known as the VEEC rebate. So the Victorian Government has said that they will give a certain amount of VEEC certificates to a product, and that gets exchanged for money that you get off your product. In order to administer these VEEC certificates, they have created what's called accredited providers, and I've just shortened it to AP. That means accredited provider. And their job is to create and sell the rebate certificates, and that's pretty much what their job of an accredited provider is, first and foremost. Now, one of those, the thing is that these accredited providers fall into two categories. If you look at where I've got installer type 2 in red, this is an accredited provider who creates and sells VEEC certificates and who also has decided to temporarily install whatever products are getting a rebate at the moment. So this is, for example, the flyer I got through my letterbox this morning for a cheap heat pump. This is definitely from an accredited provider type 2. They tend to preference installs that create the most VEEC certificates, because that's, after all, their main goal is to create and sell VEEC certificates. They subcontract work because they're not actually specialist, plumbers or hot water companies. They're accredited providers who are offering an additional service. So this doesn't mean I'm not saying not to use one, but I do want people to understand what the difference is. If you get a subcontractor, it's harder to know who to go back to for help, because it could be anybody, depending on where you live. They also don't have the same sort of, standards if as a specialist company would. The other thing is, as soon as that rebate stops, they will stop installing the product, and then I feel like that leaves you a little bit at risk of not being able to get support if you need it down the track. So what about this other type of accredited provider? That's the one in the green box, and they don't install products. They work instead with independent specialist heating, cooling and hot water companies who do the work, and then the accredited provider type 2 provides the rebate. So in Nillumbik, you've got companies like Air Fusion and Green Edge Technology and Harley Plumbing, and I'm sure there's many others that are local established businesses that we've all known and used for a long time. They get good customer feedback. They've been installing these systems for a lot longer than the rebates have been around. And this is what I would recommend. If you can afford to, I would go with one of these companies instead. And most of them can work with an accredited provider type 1 and still get the rebates for you. So you're not missing out. What was I going to say? I think that might have been it, actually. If you have any questions about that afterwards, let me know. But yeah, there's lots of really good established independent companies. If you already have 3 quotes and you're really not sure whether your quote is from an accredited provider, temporarily installing, or a specialist, these couple of examples are they make it sort of obvious. The top one just says helping Victorian homeowners get rebates. You can see what their emphasis is. The second one has a whole lot of stuff, and at the bottom it says, our philosophy is we'd rather not make a sale than sell a product that's not right for the end user. So that's your specialist installer. Final out-of-pocket cost, there are 3 rough price tiers, and it is a bit weird that that is so different. The low-cost units are anywhere from $200 to about $1,000. The one that was in my letterbox this morning was $995. It used to be that you could get a free heat pump hot water system, but again, just in 1st of Feb this year, they've decided that homeowners have to pay at least $200. I think that's a good idea because it means that homeowners have a little bit of skin in the game if they decide to buy one of the cheap ones and are more likely to complain if it fails, for example. Medium cost units are basically perfectly good. Look, for the average household, a medium cost unit is great. They're roughly probably around two and a half thousand most of the time. And then there's the really premium ones, which absolutely, if you can afford that, go for it. At least $4,000 and up to $8,000. Those are the ones that are really quiet, have really long warranties. Just everything about them is amazing. So yes, if you can do that, go for it. But if you can only go medium, that's also fine. Specialist installers will only really install medium and high cost ones because they want units that are decent and aren't going to break. The AP installers will generally go for the cheaper ones because they're just about moving products at a cheap price. So in order to choose who to get to install it and the unit, I'd look at all the factors we've just reviewed. And the key thing is, if there's a huge difference in the out-of-pocket cost, it's not because one unit is getting more rebates than the other, because as I've said, if we're in Melbourne and it's the same size, they're going to be fairly similar in the rebates. The difference is that the low-cost ones are cheaper units to begin with. So if you take the same rebate amount off a low-cost one and a high-cost one, the high-cost one is going to have a bigger out-of-pocket cost. I hope that makes sense. Then there's a few additional things. Often people say, what about the meter box? Do I need an upgrade? Well, if you're in the process of electrifying in general, then possibly you might if it hasn't been done lately. Really, you need an electrician to tell you. But some of the triggers are, for example, if you've still got ceramic fuses, you'd have to have a meter box upgrade. The picture on the bottom just shows a switchboard that's actually, maybe it's not totally full, but it's getting full. If you've got no spaces left on your switchboard, you're going to need to have something done. It could be, you could need nothing, or you could need a basic upgrade, or you might need one for a few $1,000s. So it is something to consider, and for this reason, you should always have an installer come and actually do an inspection of your meter box before they turn up on the day, because you don't want them to turn up and then go, oh, by the way, we've got to charge you another $3,000 to upgrade your meter box without you being aware of it. Okay, and other reasons why heat pumps are a great choice is that they're an electric alternative to gas. It's cheaper now to run efficient electric heat pump technology than using gas, only if you're using efficient electric heat pump technology, mind you. And often we can generate our own electricity. And if it brings you a step closer to abolishing your gas meter, then you'll be able to save about $1 a day on that. So $365 saved a year when you're able to abolish a gas meter, which is nothing to sneeze at. Oh, I've already covered this, but yes, great to combine with rooftop solar. And even if you don't have rooftop solar, electricity retailers are often now giving cheaper rates. There are some rates that companies that I think have free energy in the middle of the day to try and soak up everybody else's rooftop electricity. So if you time to take advantage of that, even if you don't have it yourself, it's still a benefit. And the other reason is that if you get a heat pump, it means you can stack your roof, your precious roof space, with solar panels rather than taking up some space for a solar hot water system. If you've got massive roof space, it won't matter, but for many of us, we want all the space we can get to generate electricity. Will you save money? Yes, you probably will. The hot water system is about 17% of annual fixed energy costs, but to be honest, it really depends what you're upgrading. If you've already got, for example, a an instant gas hot water system, that's quite efficient. It would be nice to change off it because it's gas, but if you're trying to, for example, save money and you have that and a gas ducted heating system, you'll save a lot more money more quickly than by upgrading the gas heater than you will by upgrading your instant gas hot water system. So you do want to sort of, figure out where your best place to start is. If you do decide to wait, then still have a look, get a quote, an inside inspection, decide what brand you might like. And that way, if it breaks, which they always do at the most inopportune moments, then you won't get stuck. You'll know who to ring, that everything's sorted, that your meter box is okay to go, and you can just get moving on it. And actually, I've got a slide in a moment about our local Clean Energy Nillumbik. They've got some new stickers to put in hot water systems, so I'll mention that in a moment. If you decide that for now you're going to leave your hot water system as it is, there are a few things you can do. One I already talked about is the shower head. That will already save you energy for heating that water. So that's a really worthwhile one to do. Also, lagging of the pipes. You can see this on this picture, all of the pipework is beautifully insulated, and that's what you're aiming for because you want hot water leaving that system to get into the house as hot as possible without it just leaking out through the copper pipes. And if you have mixer taps in the house, just try and get in the habit of angling them to cold so that when you flip them on just for a tiny bit of water, they're not pulling hot water into the pipes and just cools down. Okay, where to from here? I've got a few more slides and then it will be a good time to answer some questions, I think. So there's a couple of links here on heat pump hot water systems, just looking at comparisons of them. Solar Victoria has a buyer's guide as well. This, I've put them there as written links just so that when I give you the PDF copy of this, I know it's not ideal to have to write it all out, but at least that will help you locate those links. I would get a few quotes from local plumbing businesses and just do check, though, that they are able to claim the rebates. Sometimes single person plumbing companies are not able to because they just don't have the setup, but larger ones do. Really, all they need to do is be in touch with an accredited provider and organise for them to process the rebates, but that's up to them to do that, not you. Always get 3 quotes and ask lots of questions about why they're saying a certain size or, where they think it should be placed in your house. Here we go. Here's the beautiful new sticker from Clean Energy Nillumbik. If you don't know Clean Energy Nillumbik, it's our local clean energy group and they're incredibly active. They put on stacks of wonderful events through the year, including Nillumbik Sustainable House Day Trail and expert eco chats where you can go and talk to an expert on a topic of your choice for 20 minutes. They're great and they've got a good website. Oh, the other thing, they're about to have an electric vehicle webinar as well, which I'm going to go to. This sticker, they got the idea from Electrify Burundara and they've made this sticker. The idea is that it's got a QR code on it. So you can order one from them. You put it in on your gas hot water system. If it breaks, you scan that QR code and it connects you directly to local plumbers and companies that can install you an efficient heat pump. So it just takes all of the guesswork out of it. You'll get put straight onto them. So I highly recommend doing that. There's a Nillumbik Electric Home Planner, which you might like to download to look at the whole idea of electrifying your house. There's also one from Sustainability Victoria that's not just electrifying, but general things you can do in your house, your building shell, just using rooms more efficiently and ways to be more comfortable. So that's another one. If you need to, you can book in for personal advice from Mel or Ian at Council. They're really incredibly knowledgeable about everything to do with energy and home efficiency. So that's another great option. And there's a few others that are more general. So if you just want to look up, if this has whetted your appetite and you want to find out a whole lot of other things, these are some great resources.